Well, hello to you all once again, and thanks once more for tuning in to Classic Dirt Bike TV. Now, we've still a lot to see and get through before the end of 2020, although I'm already looking forward to bringing you all brand new material next year. So next up in this featured video, we're going to take a look at a nice pair of Italian motocrossers that are maybe not as common as many of the other European bikes, but nevertheless, in their day, they were much sought after as an alternative race bike. So stick around for the next few minutes as we take a look at a nice pair of Italian-made Cagiva 250s. Now, this first feature bike is a machine that I spotted at the 2013 Vets MXDN event at Farleigh Castle in the UK. Now, I'm not entirely 100% sure of the year, but I think it's a 1982 RXW 250, although of course that may be up for debate because I know absolutely nothing about this bike because I never spoke to the actual owner on the day. But whether it was up for sale or even actually taking part in the event, I'm not exactly sure, but it's a cracking example of one of these little 250 Cagivas. Now, as I recall, these Cagivas were made from all Italian components, and that of course includes the front and rear suspension and of course that delightful 250 water-cooled two-stroke motor. Now, these front forks were of course Italian made, although the manufacturer's name to me is unknown, and they're certainly not a pair of Marzocchis. But nevertheless, they still worked quite well on this little 250, and as far as I recall, they had magnesium bottoms and were exactly the same forks that were used on the Italian TGM motocross bike. Now, the back end of this 250 Cagiva had a pair of twin shock piggybacks, and if these are the originals, then they are most likely to be a pair of Corti Cossas, which of course weren't the best suspension units on the planet, although mind you, they could also be an older pair of Olin shocks. Although you probably don't need me to tell you how good these little water-cooled two-stroke Cagiva engines are, and if you've ridden or even owned an old Cagiva, you'll know that these small compact little motors could certainly pack a big punch when it came to getting the bike down the track in a hurry. Now, the fuel of course for this two-stroke motor was fed into the cylinder by a substantial reed valve block, although I'm not sure what make of carburetors actually fitted on this bike, but it looks like it could have been a big Dell'Orto or maybe even an Amel. But my apologies for not getting any pictures from the other side of the bike, because as you can see, it was leaning against a transporter at the time and the owner wasn't around, so I didn't want to move it just in case he thought I was one of those sticky fingered brigades who were taking bikes without asking. But this little Cagiva certainly looks for all the world like it's an original bike with the proper seat and that very nice alloy tailpipe. Now again, because I never spoke to the owner, I'm not entirely sure if the bike's rear swing arm is steel or alloy, but it certainly looks like it's a type of sand cast metal of some sort, although the chances are that because this is a 1982 bike, many of the other motocross bike manufacturers at this time were all mostly using alloy, so the chances are that this is an alloy swing arm. Now again, a very nice alloy fuel tank on this 250 Cagiva, which is another surprising item really, as again almost all of the off-road bike builders had by this time moved on to plastic fuel cells for their motocross machines. But nevertheless, it's still a cracking looking little Italian 250, and as I said, I'm not sure if the bike was actually taking part in this 2013 Farleigh Castle event, although if it was just sitting here waiting on a buyer, it would have been really interesting to find out if it was actually ever sold, and of course more importantly, for how much. But it has to be said that this little bike certainly looks like it's the genuine article, and appears to have all the correct parts fitted, right down to that Italian made Tomaselli throttle gasser. So anyway, that's our first Italian stallion, and next up it's the turn of this 1989 250 Cagiva Evolution bike. Now this lovely looking 250 Evolution bike is another classic Cagiva that I spotted on my travels around the paddock at a Scottish twin shock and Evolution race meeting in 2017. Now once again, at first glance, this bike appears to be another fine example of an original bike from 1989, and another very rare Italian bike, and certainly one of the first Cagivas that I've actually seen taking to the track in quite some time. But I'm sure that you're all most probably aware that Cagiva was founded way back in 1950 by Giovanni Castiglione in Varese in Italy, who initially began by manufacturing small metal parts for the engineering industry. And the actual motorcycle manufacturing department was started by Giovanni's sons, Claudio and Gianfranco, in 1978. And the Cagiva name is made up by using the first two letters of the words Castiglione, Giovanni and Varese, where of course the bikes were actually made. But in terms of the bike's 250 water-cooled motor, these were very powerful and extremely quick for a two-stroke engine, which as I recall had a CKS power valve and a 37mm Dell'Orto carburetor. Now they also had a relatively modern CDI motoplat ignition system, but it's suffice to say that if you got the right rider on board one of these 89 250s, they could certainly give any of the big four Japanese bikes a run for their money. Although mind you, this is still a quite rare machine, and you'd be very hard pressed to see one of these still taking part in any kind of Evolution race meeting, and this particular 89 250 is certainly one of the first that I've seen in a long time that was waiting to take to the track, rather than being seen on display in some museum or private bike collection. Now, a hydraulic disc brake, as you'd expect on the front, as almost all Evolution motocrossers were now fitted with these kind of braking systems by 1989. Now the front forks were White Power 4054 upside down suspension units, and were decent enough for their day, and the single rear shock was again another White Power unit, and this also performed well enough to keep the Cagiva bike's rear end in check if the track wasn't too bumpy. Again, a very nice alloy box section swing arm, which was very strong with minimum flex, and these Cagivas were also fitted with these Italian made Brembo disc brakes, which again were every bit as good as any of the Japanese bikes of their day. Although it's quite surprising that this 89 250 still has almost all of its original parts, although the chances are that both the bike's front and rear tyres, of course, are not factory items, as these will certainly have been changed many times since 1989. But there was certainly no shortage of horses to transmit the power to this rear sprocket and wheel, and when that 250 motor was running at full pelt, this back end was turning at an alarming rate. But again, I have to say that the plastics and of course the rest of this Cagiva 250 is still in great condition for an 89 motocrosser, and this bike could quite easily make a very decent display machine because of its condition and relative rarity, although you have to give the owner credit for not going down the display bike route and to continue using it as a weekend racer and letting us all get a chance to see it in its natural habitat. But back in the day, Cagiva did build some iconic off-roaders, and of course they also built a multitude of other road-going motorcycles as well. And by 1979, Cagiva were producing almost 40,000 motorcycles a year, all powered by two-stroke motors from 125 to 350 cc. And in this picture we can see the bike's owner, Gary Milne, enjoying his WMX 250 Cagiva at that Scottish Twin Shock and Evolution event in 2017. But these 250 WMX Cagiva 250s are without question good looking bikes, and as we all know, the one thing the Italians are very good at is designing great looking motorcycles, and they've certainly proved that point in this pair of Italian stallions that we've featured in this clip. So I do hope you've enjoyed this very brief look at these two very nice Cagiva examples, and if these are the kind of off-road bikes that you like to look at here on YouTube, then I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Okay, coming up next on my channel, we'll be taking a look at this 1981 490 Michael. So once again, thanks for taking the time to tune in, and we'll speak again very soon when we all return to watch Classic Dirt Bike TV.